What if King George III never lost the American Revolution? History is often a tale of pivotal moments, of events that, had they turned out differently, might have reshaped the world we live in today. Chief among those moments is the outcome of the American Revolution. What if King George III and the British Crown had prevailed? What kind of world would we inhabit today, and how might the relationships between nations, powers, and people have evolved? This speculative journey delves into an alternative timeline where the American colonies did not achieve independence, sparking debate about the fragility of freedom, the impact of empire, and the cost of power. The American Revolution is often celebrated as the birth of modern democracy, a war that ignited a global fire for self-determination. But history could have unfolded very differently. What if Britain had crushed the colonial rebellion? Several factors, like better military strategy, greater political unity in Britain, or stronger alliances, may have tipped the scales in King George III's favor. Instead of retreating after their losses at Yorktown, the British could have maintained control of the colonies, enforcing their authority through sheer dominance. What would this mean for the colonies themselves? The Declaration of Independence might have been forgotten, its ideals buried under continued taxation and firm monarchical rule. Patriots like George Washington might have been executed or exiled, their dreams of freedom extinguished. If the British had won, the revolution as a global symbol may never have materialized. Would the colonies have remained obedient subjects under British governance? Or would subsequent rebellions have created a slow-burning revolution later? If King George III had retained control over the 13 colonies, daily colonial life would have changed dramatically. Under British rule, taxation without representation likely would have continued, possibly fueling resentment. However, Britain could have moved to adopt policies to pacify colonists and solidify its position, such as granting limited autonomous governance like in later dominions such as Canada or Australia. This model might have fostered a sense of stability, preventing further uprisings. Culturally, the colonies likely would have retained even stronger ties to British traditions, language, and identity. The patriotic ideals that helped forge the distinct American identity might never have taken root. Instead, we might see something akin to a British America, a more firmly integrated arm of the empire, cooperating with Britain's broader global ambitions. Would the colonies have remained fragmented, with local governments subordinated to London? Or, as economic needs grew, might Britain allow a kind of federalized system similar to Canada? These possibilities ignite questions about how Britain's rule in North America could have shaped societal norms and governance on the continent. The American Revolution was a seed that sprouted democracy in ways unforeseen at its inception. Other revolutions, like those in France and Latin America, drew inspiration from the bold Declaration of Freedom penned on American soil. If this war had failed, would these revolutionary fires have dimmed or been extinguished altogether? Without the United States as a symbol of independent governance and freedom, the global push for democracy might have sputtered. Monarchical rule across Europe may have lasted longer, with other colonies worldwide remaining under imperial control well into the modern era. The ripple effect of American independence went beyond borders, proving that autonomy through collective struggle was possible. A victorious British crown might have delayed this realization, leaving countries to accept their colonized fates far longer. This forces us to ask, are democracy and independence inevitable, or are they fragile victories that depend on sparks like the American Revolution to ignite them? In this alternative timeline, the legacy of a victorious King George III depends heavily on what Britain could have achieved by maintaining control over the American colonies. With access to abundant resources and manpower, British America might have bolstered the empire's global dominance. America's fertile lands, raw materials, and growing industrial capacity could have been exploited to compete with rivals like Napoleonic France, potentially altering the outcomes of European conflicts. Could Britain have outpaced its economic, military, and political rivals faster and held on to its global influence well into the modern age? Or would America's vast resources have encouraged the crown to stretch itself too thin, fighting rebellions both at home and abroad to maintain control over restless colonies? Prolonged uprisings might have drained British coffers and morale, leading to instability at the heart of the empire. Just quickly, before I get into the interesting stuff, don't forget to like and subscribe the video, leave a comment, and request your own video. The possibility of internal strife within an overstretched British Empire highlights the delicate balance between expansion and manageability, raising questions about whether even the most powerful empires can stave off eventual collapse. The Industrial Revolution was largely fueled by the resources of colonial territories, but the addition of a fully British-controlled America could have accelerated these developments. With control over American agriculture, raw materials, and nascent industries, Britain might have achieved an unprecedented economic boom. A stronger commercial empire could have seen massive global supply chains, with British pioneers leading nearly every sector of industry. But might this also have meant deeper exploitation? A victorious Britain may have imposed tighter control over American industries, directing their growth to serve empire-centric goals rather than fostering local innovation. This could have stunted the eventual global economic power we associate with the United States today, leaving America a subservient region without robust independence in trade or technological development. This alternate economic trajectory raises a compelling question. Would the world's industrial and financial systems have centralized around London instead of Washington? And how would that affect modern trade and technological advancement? Even in this speculative timeline, stability in British America may have been tenuous. Rebellions often linger in the shadow of imperial victories, brewing over time. The unresolved grievances of the colonies, rooted in taxation, land disputes, and governance, might have created an ongoing cycle of unrest. Additionally, Native American populations, already suffering from colonial expansion, might have witnessed heightened and more systematic displacement under prolonged British rule. Unlike the independent United States, which followed its own westward expansion policies, Britain's management might have led to smaller-scale, slower-paced settler movements, or possibly even harsher controls over indigenous lands. Would France, Spain, or other imperial rivals have exploited a weakened British America in their bids for dominance? Could alliances between indigenous nations, European rivals, and dissatisfied colonists have erupted into fresh waves of conflict that rewritten North America's borders? The American Civil War is often seen as an inevitable outcome of the tensions between North and South. But under British rule, this conflict might have been suppressed or avoided entirely. While Britain eventually abolished slavery within its empire, the timing and politics of such a move in America are uncertain. If abolition were delayed, tensions between loyalists and human rights advocates might have escalated into uniquely British struggles over slavery rather than a civil war. This raises significant questions about the trajectory of civil rights and freedoms under a British-controlled system. What about World War II and the Cold War? Without an independent United States rising as a superpower, the Allied forces in WWs could have been drastically weaker, a scenario that could have catastrophic consequences on the fight against fascism. Without the United States and Soviet Union as competing superpowers during the Cold War, geopolitics may have followed a very different course, raising the possibility of a British-centered global contest for power, or an entirely different set of rivalries. Would these dramatic global shifts have resulted in a more peaceful or more conflict-ridden world? The consequences of British America on 20th century history are tantalizingly ambiguous. Central to this fascinating what-if scenario is the enduring question of freedom. Would the ideals of democracy, equity, and self-determination have found other ways to bloom under British rule? Or are they inexorably tied to the success of the American Revolution? Could Britain have evolved its colonies into a model of cooperative governance, or would autocratic monarchical rule have crushed revolutionary ideals in their infancy? Empires often fade, but their legacies linger across generations, sometimes as lessons, other times as scars. A victorious King George III might have prolonged Britain's imperial reign, but every empire faces the challenge of balancing control with the aspirations of the governed. Could the British Empire have maintained its grip on the colonies long enough for public opinion or technology to force their eventual independence in a less violent manner? This is a debate that goes beyond speculative history. It encourages us to reflect on the costs and benefits of power, the wins and losses of revolutions, and the delicate dance that turns history's potential into reality. The alternate timeline of a victorious King George III is not just a thought experiment. It's a lens through which we examine the forces that shape nations and the fragility of independence. It invites us to challenge assumptions, explore the power structures of empire, and consider the transformative impact of revolutions. Would the world be better, worse, or simply different had these events turned out otherwise? Perhaps freedom and democracy would have blossomed elsewhere, or perhaps they would have been delayed for generations. The path of history is never fixed, and this speculative journey challenges us to think critically, not just about what was lost and gained, but about where we're headed in an ever-changing world. What do you think? Let the debate begin. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video.